The Pacific morning was calm, until a shadow thundered just 50 feet above the waves. What happens when a calm, high-altitude bomber becomes a raging ship killer, skimming the ocean like a hawk on the hunt? What happens when desperation meets invention at 250 miles an hour, charging straight at a Japanese destroyer? During the fiercest 15 minutes of the 3-day Battle of the Bismarck Sea, the Imperial Japanese Navy learned that answer the hardest way possible. Between March 2nd and March 4th, 1943, 8 transports and 4 destroyers vanished beneath the waves. Nearly 3,000 men were lost, and the weapon that made it happen wasn't a battleship or a torpedo, it was a bomber. This is the story of how one man's obsession turned the B-25 Mitchell into a flying gunship, how American mechanics rewrote the rules of naval warfare, and how the Pacific changed forever in 1/4 hour of fire and steel. By late 1942, the Pacific belonged to Japan. After Pearl Harbor, the fall of the Philippines, and the loss of Wake Island, the rising sun stretched across thousands of miles of ocean. Each week, long columns of Japanese transports steamed from Rabaul to Leh, carrying troops, fuel, and munitions to feed an empire that seemed unstoppable. For General Douglas MacArthur's weary 5th Air Force in Australia, the situation was dire. They could see the convoys, they could bomb them, but they could not stop them. Allied doctrine still clung to the textbook of Europe. Bomb from 20,000 feet, rely on gravity and luck. In the thin air above the Pacific, flying fortresses, massive B-17s, released their payloads onto moving ships below. The results were dismal. By the time a 500-pound bomb fell 4 miles, a Japanese captain needed only to twist his helm, and the weapon would splash harmlessly into open sea. Dozens of missions, thousands of bombs, almost no kills. The men in the cockpits knew it. The engineers in the hangars cursed it. Something had to change. In the workshops of Port Moresby and Townsville, crews began whispering a crazy thought. What if they stopped aiming from the clouds and attacked from the waves? What if bombers could fight like fighters, racing in at mast height, guns blazing, bombs skipping like stones? It was heresy against every Air Corps manual. But in a war being lost, heresy was exactly what the Pacific needed. Soon, a weathered mechanic from Arkansas named Paul Irving Pappy Gunn would prove that sometimes the most dangerous weapon isn't forged in a factory, but built by hand, by a man who refuses to accept defeat. Pappy Gunn was never meant to change the course of a war. He was a 6th-grade dropout from Quitman, Arkansas, a farm boy with grease under his nails and a fascination for flying machines. He joined the Navy as a teenager, learned to repair airplanes long before he ever flew one, and by the 1930s had become one of America's most skilled enlisted pilots. When war erupted, Gunn had already spent 2 decades inside aircraft. He had flown from the USS Langley, Lexington, and Saratoga, the Navy's first carriers, and understood that every plane, no matter how well designed, was only as good as the man who could keep it flying. In the late 1930s, he retired from the Navy, moved his family to the Philippines, and founded Philippine Airlines with 4 red Beechcraft planes. For a few peaceful years, he flew passengers between islands, raised children, and built something from nothing. Then came December 7th, 1941. When Japan invaded the Philippines, Pappy's world collapsed. His wife and 4 children were imprisoned in the Santo Tomas internment camp in Manila. His airline, his home, everything he had built, gone. Gunn escaped to Australia with a handful of American personnel. But he emerged from that flight a changed man. The Army Air Forces commissioned him as a captain and assigned him to the 5th Air Force as a maintenance officer. What they got was something far more dangerous. A grieving mechanic turned visionary. He didn't mourn. He built. Pappy Gunn had nothing left to lose and 20 years of aviation knowledge to spend. He knew that to sink ships, you had to fly low, fight dirty, and ignore every rule in the book. In the hangars of Townsville and Port Moresby, Pappy Gunn began to experiment, stripping the glass noses from bombers, tearing out bomb sights, replacing them with solid metal and machine guns scavenged from wrecked fighters. Working with Jack Fox, a representative from North American aviation, he turned the B-25 Mitchell into something no one had ever seen, a medium bomber with the bite of a fighter. 4 guns in the nose became 6, then 8. Some variants carried extra side mounts or gun pods for even more firepower. When it was done, the nose of a B-25 looked like a steel porcupine, each barrel ready to spit half-inch bullets at nearly 800 rounds per minute. It was unapproved, unofficial, and utterly lethal. A field-made gunship that would soon do what fleets could not, turn Japanese convoys into graveyards. The B-25 Mitchell was never meant to fight this way. It had been designed as a medium bomber, a twin-engine workhorse with a range of about 1,300 miles, a cruise speed near 230 miles per hour, and a service ceiling close to 24,000 feet. A stable, balanced aircraft for precision bombing, not a knife fighter skimming the ocean. But under Pappy Gunn's hands, it became something entirely new. Fueled by loss and the need to strike back, Gunn poured his grief into engineering. He and his crew reinforced the nose with thick sheet steel, bolted 8 Browning AN M250 caliber machine guns in tight formation, and linked their triggers to a single control on the pilot's yoke. Each gun fired between 600 and 850 rounds per minute. When all 8 spoke at once, the air in front of the plane turned white hot, hundreds of tracers slicing through the sky like glowing needles. A 2-second burst could deliver nearly 100 pounds of lead into a target. To balance the extra weight, Gunn's team shifted ammunition racks and modified the bomb bay. The heavier nose moved the plane's center of gravity forward, but the B-25's twin-tail design absorbed the change perfectly. It could still fly low, fast, and steady, perfect for hunting ships. But the new guns were only half the answer. The other half came from a tactic so bold it bordered on madness: skip bombing. Instead of attacking from 4 miles up, pilots would roar in at mast height, sometimes just 50 feet above the sea, flying at 250 miles per hour. At the exact moment, they would release a 500-pound bomb with a delayed fuse. The bomb would strike the water, bounce once or twice like a skipping stone, and slam into a ship's hull just below the waterline before exploding seconds later. It was part science, part instinct, and it worked. To protect the bombers during their run, the forward guns swept the decks clean of gunners and lookouts. The Japanese had prepared for attacks from above, not for aircraft that appeared at eye level, blasting through curtains of flak, spitting fire, and dropping bombs that came from the horizon instead of the clouds. Their destroyers, built to duel with other ships, were suddenly helpless against this new predator of the sea. General George Kenney, commander of the 5th Air Force, immediately saw the potential. He brought Gunn onto his staff, gave him full freedom to modify as many aircraft as he could, and ordered entire squadrons to be converted. By early 1943, dozens of these Strafer B-25s were ready for combat, their crews trained to fly lower and faster than any bomber before them. Alongside Australian Beaufighters, American A-20s, and P-38 Lightnings, they formed a new kind of strike force, one built on creativity instead of convention. The Japanese had no idea what awaited them. Their intelligence still assumed that Allied bombers would come from the sky, not from the sea. Convoy after convoy had made the run from Rabaul to Lae without serious loss. On paper, the upcoming mission across the Bismarck Sea looked routine. Another supply run feeding the imperial garrisons clinging to New Guinea. But on this voyage, the ocean itself would turn against them. At dawn on March 3, 1943, the convoy left Rabaul. 8 transports and 8 destroyers carrying nearly 7,000 soldiers, weapons, and supplies. Their course was plotted carefully, hugging clouds and mist, relying on timing to slip past Allied patrols. The Japanese captains believed their air, cover, and escorting destroyers would keep them safe. They were wrong. That same morning, Allied reconnaissance spotted the fleet. Orders flashed across New Guinea. Attack immediately. Dozens of bombers and fighters scrambled to intercept. Among them were the new low-flying B-25s, machines that had once been precision bombers, now reborn as ship-killing gunships. For the first time, they would put Pappy Gunn's invention to the ultimate test. At 10:15 in the morning, as the convoy crossed open water north of Lae, dark shapes appeared on the horizon, sun-glinting wings sweeping low over the waves. To the Japanese lookouts, they looked like standard bombers beginning their run. They braced for high-altitude bombs. They never imagined what was coming next. The lead aircraft dropped to 50 feet, throttles wide open, engines screaming. Its nose flashed bright orange, 8 Brownings hammered in rhythm, each burst echoing like a drum roll across the sea. Tracers tore through the decks of the nearest destroyer, cutting down the first gunners before they could fire back. In seconds, chaos spread through the convoy. Ships broke formation, crews dove for cover, and the calm Pacific exploded into a wall of flame and torn steel. At 250 miles per hour, the lead Mitchell released its 500-pound bomb. It skipped once, twice, then struck the side of a transport and vanished beneath the waves. A heartbeat later, the sea erupted in fire and metal. The blast ripped through the hull and split the ship in half. Men leapt into burning water, their uniforms aflame. The air filled with the roar of engines, the crack of gunfire, and the hiss of steam from shattered boilers. Wave after wave followed. Bombers dove in from opposite directions, crossing paths at terrifying speed. Each pilot fired short, disciplined bursts, then pulled up just enough to avoid the ocean spray. The combined sound was deafening, a symphony of machine guns, engines, and exploding ships. Transports turned wildly, colliding with escorts. Destroyers tried to shield them, but the low-flying bombers were too fast, too precise, too relentless. In minutes, the formation that had looked so proud at dawn was scattered across the waves, burning, sinking, dying. One transport took a direct hit near its ammunition hold. The explosion blew its bow clean off. Another was struck amidships. It rolled to starboard and capsized in less than 2 minutes. A destroyer attempted to ram one of the attackers, but the pilot pulled up at the last second, raking its deck with gunfire. Flames engulfed the bridge. As the Japanese struggled to mount a defense, more Allied aircraft appeared, A-20 Havocs, Beaufighters, and even B-17s diving from the clouds. The convoy was being hit from every direction, from sea level to the stratosphere. Within 15 minutes, the battle was over. 8 transports and 4 destroyers lay burning or sinking beneath columns of black smoke. Nearly 3,000 Japanese soldiers and sailors were dead or dying. Only about 1,200 reached Lae. The rest either perished in the waves or were rescued later by smaller vessels fleeing back toward Rabaul. Those who survived spoke of a sky that had turned into a wall of fire, of bullets that seemed to rise from the sea itself. For the first time, the Imperial Navy understood it could no longer move freely across the Pacific. When the smoke cleared, the Bismarck Sea was quiet again, littered with oil slicks and drifting wreckage. The Japanese high command was stunned. They had lost not just ships, but the belief that their convoys could survive Allied air power. From that day on, they would never again attempt a large troop transport through the Bismarck Sea. The supply artery to New Guinea had been severed, not by fleets or submarines, but by a handful of bombers flying at mast height. For General George Kenney, it was proof that the war had changed. The future of air combat would belong to those who could think differently. And for Pappy Gunn, it was personal. He had taken his loss, his grief, and turned it into vengeance, a kind of mechanical poetry written in steel and fire. His field modification became a legend, transforming the B-25 into a symbol of raw American ingenuity. In the months that followed, more squadrons adopted this strafer configuration. The tactic spread across the Pacific, from the Solomons to the Philippines. The same idea, heavy forward firepower and low-level attack, would inspire aircraft like the A-26 Invader and even the gunships of the Cold War. The line that began in a dusty hangar at Townsville would echo for decades. But for those who were there, it was never about glory. It was about survival, about men who refused to lose a war simply because the rulebook said they should. Pappy Gunn embodied that spirit. He never asked for medals. He once said quietly, "I was just a mechanic who got mad enough to fix the problem." And in fixing it, he changed history. The Battle of the Bismarck Sea was not won by the largest army, or the most expensive ship, or the most advanced technology. It was won by imagination, by one man who believed that victory could be built, piece by piece, with a wrench in one hand and courage in the other. 8 ships, 4 destroyers, 15 minutes, a single idea turned the tide of a war. These stories of courage and invention deserve to be remembered. Keep the fire line burning, and join us for the next untold chapter of World War II.